Hello, hello, and welcome to the Profit Lab Show. I'm your host, Marie Torossian, CPA and 10X certified business coach, and I'm so glad you are here. If you're new to the show, go ahead and subscribe or follow us wherever you're watching or listening us. And just so you can be sure to get our alerts when we drop new episodes, which would be every Wednesday at 12 noon time Eastern time on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Podbean, Apple Podcasts, and more. Today, we are stepping into pillar number 12, which is all about wealth, exit, and legacy. Because obviously, you didn't build your business just to stay on the treadmill running forever. You built it for building freedom, for having options, for making an impact, for a life that isn't held hostage by your calendar, which we talked about a lot calendar last time around. So if you missed that conversation, make sure to go back to the prior episodes to get more information on that. So today we're going to talk about how your business becomes a vehicle for long-term wealth and how to start building your freedom plan now, even if you're not ready to exit anytime soon. So let's get into it. Your business is a vehicle, not a destination. So that is a complete mindset shift that changes everything. Your business is only one asset in your wealth plan, not the whole plan. You may have heard, and I know my mentor, Grant Cardone, always talks about it, is building your wealth is going to be built on multiple revenue streams, not just a business, one business. So with that in mind, think of your business as one of the assets, one of the main revenue streams. A lot of service business owners accidentally build a business that looks successful on the outside, but it could be very fragile behind the scenes. Revenue might be decent, but the profit might be thin. The owner would possibly is getting paid, maybe not, inconsistently. So it's kind of tight on cash. And there's probably no runway. And the business completely depends on the business owner for sales, delivery, decisions, and client relationships. So it's really heavy on the owner. So that's not a freedom. That is running on a treadmill. So what you want instead is a three-part outcome. You want a profitable business that funds your life today and the future. You want to build personal wealth outside of the business, so your future isn't dependent on the daily effort of grinding in your business. And then you want to have options for your business. Do you want to keep your business and pass it down to your family, your children? Do you want to scale it? Do you want to delegate it to your team members? You want to sell it? You want to merge with another company? So there's different options to look at. Which one are you considering, right? So here's the three layers of a freedom plan that you want to consider, okay? Think about profit right now, because your business has to be profitable. You want to think of healthy margins. You want to think of consistent owner's pay and cash reserves. And we've talked about in our episodes, having cash reserves of 12 to 18 months would really solidify your business. Creating wealth. What are the assets that you have outside of the business? Do you look at your net worth? It's an important thing to look at. It's one thing to have a balance sheet for the business. It's a whole different thing to have a balance sheet for your personal net assets, right? And of course, we want to think about, are you going to exit your business, or you're going to transition to something else? What does that plan look like? All right. So I want you to notice something here. So if you don't build the first layer, which is your business, the profitability of your business, the other two layers don't happen. Wealth doesn't happen, and you're not able to exit the business at some point. So what I'd like to do now is to kind of go a little bit more deep dive into each of the layers, so we can give some examples. And guys, I always try to give you as many examples as possible, so it's relatable and you're able to take action. It's all about action here. Okay. So layer number one is profit, having healthy margins and a consistent owner's pay. This is the part most people skip because they're focused on the top line revenue. But revenue doesn't necessarily buy freedom. Revenue is very important. It is the top line, and many people struggle with the top line. But let's assume you have a pretty good top line, but your profit is very low. But profit is what buys freedom. And then the cash that you have buys options. So here's some things you can ask yourself. Are you paying consistently yourself from the business and appropriately? There's two things that happens here that I've seen in my working with different, mentees and also accounting clients. Business owners either don't pay themselves enough, or they completely drain the business. Then they take out everything in distributions and the equity becomes negative. So you don't want to do either or, like the extremes. You want to be able to pay yourself a consistent amount that makes sense. And if you are an S Corp, that's something that's actually, we call it in tax, reasonable compensation. But this is not about taxes, but just it comes to mind. And you want to be able to use the funds, the extra funds that are available in the business, to be able to invest in something outside of the business. So think about also, do you have at least 3 to 6 months of operating reserves? Now, 3 to 6 months is very little, but it's a start, right? You can't get to 18 months of reserves, overnight. So think of like right now, do you have about 3 months to 6 months? If not, that would be an initial thing to work on. Is your profit margin where it should be for the type of business that you have? Usually about 20% profit is a healthy profit margin. So what do your financials tell you about your profit margin? So here's an example. Let's say an agency or a business owner is great with revenue. Okay. Let's say it's doing about 1.2 million in revenues per year. On paper, like I said, it looks really amazing. But if the delivery costs are high, your team is super overloaded, and your prices haven't increased, your retainer prices, your monthly recurring revenue is not keeping up. You might be sitting at maybe 8 to 10% profit. That basically means about 96K to 120K. So after that, let's say you have to pay taxes on that profit. You have to pay for your debt and other things, right? So what would be left with is very little, even less than that. So the cash is out the door. There's nothing left for any reserves. So suddenly what it would feel like is like every month is a very stressful month, right? So how do you fix that? The fix is not necessarily let's get more clients, because there's something else that's not working. So you might want to think through tightening some of the scopes. Like maybe you have way too many different delivery options. Your services are just way too scattered all over the place. That creates actually more overload on the team, and it actually costs more. You might first consider raising prices, which a lot of people are so scared of. I mean, if the grocery store is increasing prices, I think you're safe about increasing your prices, right? Improve utilization. Cut down any profit leaks, implement more efficiencies that become, cost-effective, creates cost-effective business. All right. So here's a quick checkpoint for you. Okay. I want you to create a scoreboard. And we've talked about different KPIs in the past. So I don't want to go back and repeat those, but I want you to consider these few to add on to them. Your owner's pay. What are you actually paying yourself versus what you planned to pay yourself? This is where a budget or a forecast will, help to keep track. What is your profit margin every month? If it's going up and down like this, that's a problem, right? We need to have some type of a consistency. And if it's dropping, we want to think of it. What happened here with it dropped? What changed month to month, even year over year? And then again, look at your cash reserves. How many months of runway do you have? 3, 6, 12, 18. That's what to look at. So if these numbers, if you start tracking them month after month, if they aren't improving, you don't have a freedom plan. You just have a revenue plan. So first layer, focus on profit. So now let's get to layer 2, creating wealth. Again, here, just to be clear, I'm not giving investment advice. This is just general concepts that you can research on Google and find it yourself as well. But I'm just putting this through as part of overall discussion. You can, go to your investment advisor for this, but just an idea here. Think of what you are investing in once you pay yourself, or if you take out distributions, whatever that is. If you're taking money already out of the business to pay yourself or to take out distributions as an owner, what do you do with that? Are you blowing it on the craziest stuff, or are you actually investing in something to build that next asset, right? Are you buying cash flowing assets that don't depend on you? So, and it's actually providing you, passive income, right? Are you thinking in terms of your personal net worth, not just the business revenue or profit? This is where having your own personal books, right, to keep records of your monthly expenses, your annual expenses, plus your balance sheet, your net worth is going to be very important. Family offices, provide that service, I believe. So if you don't have that one, maybe you're going to consider one. But here's the trap though. If your wealth is trapped in the business, you're going to be forced to keep working, even if you're tired, even when you get sick. And worst case scenario, you might actually completely lose it because there's no one else that can replace you in the business. So let's think about another example. Let's think about, let's say, an IT business owner. So let's say this business owner is investing all of the money that he's making into tools, software, equipment, hiring, and growth, which is great, right? And that can work until you realize you're building a machine that you can't step away from. Everything is dependent on you. You have no personal assets outside of the business. And if the market shifts, you feel completely exposed. So wealth is all about creating that second engine, the third and the fourth and so on, and building up to like 7 different engines that can provide that freedom that we're talking about. Again, this is not an investment advice by any means. Please check with your investment advisor on these ideas on how you can invest your extra funds into different engines. So your future should not depend on your ability to grind, but it should actually pay for your lifestyle and building your legacy. Something that I just did recently as part of my accounting client, and he's actually in IT. We ran his valuation. We created a forecast for him because he is considering a possible merger. And when we created the valuation, when we put together the valuation for him, he was, somewhat surprised. And then when he got an overall discussion with the prospective buyer, he was shocked that they were trying to pay him a lot less. So the idea is that this business owner is actually starting to realize even though he's still stuck in the business, he's still doing a lot of things. There's certain structures that needs to be placed. The valuation came in pretty good, but then it also brought up the fact that there's so much more he can do in the business to build it to the next level even before selling it to anyone. So these are things you want to think about. Like if you had, God forbid, if you had to stop working for 6 months and you were very sick and you couldn't take care of the business, like what would happen to your lifestyle? Who would take care of your family? Can your spouse jump in and take over some of the tasks? Is there someone internally that can step up their game and be able to take care of the business? So you don't want to have a business that's completely relying on you, right? And you want to be able to build wealth outside of the business. So in case something happens and you need to sell or merge or whatever in an emergency situation, the rest of your life doesn't suffer. Yeah. Okay. Now let's talk about layer number 3, which is, business exit or maybe transition. What happens when you're done with it? I'm like, I don't want to handle this business anymore. Because I know that most people think that, they're never going to sell the business. But in reality is you would sell the business for any of these unexpected reasons that I've already mentioned. You could get sick. Something else could happen. You might have something else happening in your life that would divert your attention and something happens there. But at the same time, you want to have those options of like, if, to consider what would you want to do with your business instead of falling in that situation of the tragedy or whatever situation occurred. How about you think about it ahead of time, right? So here's a common paths that most business owners would take. They could sell the business to a prospective buyer, like the one example I mentioned that my client is talking to. You can decide to keep delegating, building it to a point where it's completely manager and CEO managed and you become the chair. So that means you have grown it exponentially, right? Another thing you consider is merging or adding a partner, combining strengths with another group and then reducing risk. And then eventually maybe some others that might consider winding down intentionally, right? It depends on what your business is and what are the potential, okay? So here's another example I want to work you through. So let's say there's a consultant who wants to kind of step back, wind down, but can't. So let's say this consultant is doing about $900K a year. And they're thinking, hey, I don't want to sell. I just want to work less hours, okay? 10 to 15 hours a week. I don't want to overwork myself. Great. That's like a transition plan. But it will only work if delivery is systematized. Someone else is handling all the client communication and overseeing delivery, all of that. Sales is handled as well. You have a complete, sales team, that's doing all the selling. And so it's not dependent on the consultant, the owner. And the pricing of the services will support those few hours. So it's not dependent on those 10 to 15 hours that the consultant wants to do. So it's not hourly rate. So let's say it's a retainer that's big enough that covers everything, right? Even if the person steps back. So this is a great way to think about transitioning in the business. And now I want to go into a little bit about making the business scalable, even if you never sell. As I was doing this valuation for my client, again, key things that we had talked about before came about again. So I wanted to make sure I mentioned here on the podcast. So things that makes a valuable, sellable business, whether you're ready to sell or not, would be documenting systems. So the quality of the delivery of whatever it is, service, product, or whatever, isn't dependent on you. There's a documented system and processes. Number 2 would be a diversified client base. So if that the one client, for example, is not the only one controlling your future. So one of the things, even from an auditor perspective, we would always look at is which clients or how many clients are making up your 70% of your business. So if it's, for example, narrowing down to like 3 or 4, that's a concern because if one of them leaves or doesn't renew the contract, you could lose a big chunk of money. So that's what we mean by diversified client base. So you want to have many of them making up that 70%, right? Next thing is recurring or predictable revenue. If you've noticed, a lot of, especially in IT world, they talk about monthly recurring revenue. It's the same when it comes to valuation. If you have more systematic monthly recurring revenue, the valuation is going to come higher. So you want to be able to, for those of you in service industry that still charge hourly, I would highly, highly recommend switching to a recurring monthly fee so that when you're ready to sell, your valuation can come at higher. And of course, the next level of that is if you have multi-year contracts, that's a whole different game. And the last thing I want to say is just having a team that can operate without you. So it's not, the business is not completely reliant on you to deliver everything, but the team can literally run the business, do everything, deliver everything, and you just become, oversight, or like we said earlier, the chair of the board. So you're not in the day-to-day activity anymore. So everything we talked about so far, it's been, the pieces of the pillars that I've been talking about in the last episode. So we talked about systems, pricing, leadership, delegation, and financial clarity. So, and here in the pillar number 12 is when we're connecting all of these pieces into wealth and freedom and building legacy. One of the other things I want to mention before we wrap up for today's podcast is I want you to ask, if someone bought my business tomorrow, what would they be afraid of? So think of from the buyer's perspective, the buyer's lens. Okay. Some of the things could be that the owner is the business. So the buyer would be afraid of that. So if you are the business, it's less likely that a buyer would be interested in buying your business, because they're your business is more of a private job. Processes are in our head. So if all of the processes are in your mind and there's nothing documented that a possible buyer would be able to literally take your business and run it, it's going to be difficult. They're going to be afraid to do anything. Maybe your financial numbers are not clean. I cannot stress enough how many times I've seen business owners, they come to us because their numbers are so crazy. And in some cases, I found even worse situation once I get in there. So if you can't rely on your numbers, certainly enough, the buyer is not going to be interested. As soon as they look at it, they're like, something is off. And if you are ever ready to sell, there's going to be so much information to be shared, especially financially. So if your financials are not clean and ready for a possible prospective buyer, that's going to cause trouble for sure. Maybe you don't have consistent delivery. So maybe that's something that you haven't documented, or, how is the possible buyer going to take it and deliver it themselves, right, with their team? And another one could be that you don't have recurring revenue. As I mentioned, if you have not converted your business into monthly recurring revenue, that's a place to start for sure. Okay. So your job is to remove those fears, the things that I mentioned, one by one, to make sure that your business is sellable. And if a buyer or a prospective buyer comes along, you have the comfort and the confidence to be able to negotiate and deliver all the things that they're asking and be able to close on it quickly. Okay. As we wrap up for today, I want to make sure that I give you your profit question of the week. Here it is. If you wanted the option to exit your business in 5 years from now, what would need to change today? Okay. So what does your business look like 5 years from now? And if you were wanting to sell in 5 years, what are things that you need to work on right away? Right away. Okay. It's all about action. And here comes the actionable takeaways, like every time. Number one, review your current owner pay and profit. Don't guess it. Go back into your financials and get those numbers, the exact numbers. And if you don't have it, you know what you have to do. Go get your numbers fixed. Okay. Number two, decide your freedom number. What do you need annually to live your ideal life? And remember, if you're, let's say in your 40s, you have another 45, 50 years to live, like that number is going to be changing. So what are those numbers over the years? Number three, choose your preferred option for your business. As you think about the future and your profit freedom and your wealth, do you want to sell the business at some point? Do you want to keep it? Do you want to expand it with a team? You want to merge? These are the options and the choices you have to make today. And number four, pick one sellable business lever to improve this quarter. Is it going to be systems, client diversification, predictable revenue, or maybe team independence? So which one you're going to work on? Make sure to put your comments, put it in the comments, because I want to read them. I want to respond to them, and I want to be helpful to you with all of these. So next episode, we're going to stay here on pillar 12, talking about wealth and legacy. We're going to talk specifically about making your business transferable and less dependent on you. So make sure to show up next Wednesday for that information. If this episode hit home, book some time with me to discuss your situation. I will put my booking link in the description box so you can click and we can have a conversation together. See you next Wednesday, noon Eastern time, and have a successful week.